Welcome to the March Wake Up West Coast. We are so glad that you're here this morning. It's even warming up a little bit, so we're here for it, ready for an awesome day. My name is Britt Delo. I am the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at the Chamber, and you're stuck with me today because Jody is out in D.C. She was actually selected to be in the U.S. Chamber Committee of 100, which is a very prestigious position to be in, and she's out there representing our business community in D.C., which is just awesome. Yes, thank you to Jody. I'd like to say welcome to those attending virtually today, and then also want to give a shout out. We have a group, a future prepped education group here today. Where are our students? They might be in line right now, but give us a wave, raise your hand. Nicole Gittler and her class, thank you for being here. If you get a chance, be sure to say hello. They're out here stepping outside of their comfort zone and networking with us this morning and really look at integrating education and business, so we're so grateful that they can be here. Also, we can't do our programs without our incredible sponsors. So I just want to take a minute and thank our sponsors. We have Matt Baker here from Landscape Design Services. If you did not get, let's give him a round of applause. If you did not get a chance to stop by their table right out front here, please do that on the way out. I know I, for one, will need to be calling your team later, Matt. I've got some weeding and fertilizing that needs to happen. My lawn is not looking great, so your team might need to come out and help us out. And then also, I'd like to thank Warner Norcross and Judd, our program sponsor today. Let's give them a round of applause. And I'm excited to welcome Beth O'Laughlin up to the stage. I will just be talking for a second here. So come on up, Beth. Let's give her a warm welcome. What are we gonna do? Just stand? Yeah. We're just gonna keep it cool and stand. Yeah. Stand. Awesome. Beth, thank you so much for sponsoring this morning. Do you want to just kick us off and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Warner?
Sure. So, hi again. Name's Beth O'Laughlin. So I'm the executive partner of the Holland office here at Warner. A little bit, I guess, just about Warner generally. So it's a fairly large firm. I think it's the second biggest in the state, kind of does a little bit of everything. Holland office is kind of unique. There's only 4 of us in the Holland office, and we all do estate planning. So that's what I do, primarily high net worth estate planning, succession planning, that type of thing. So we're right over there on 8th Street.
Awesome. Thanks, Beth. And thank you so much. Warner has been a longtime partner of the Chamber, and we're so appreciative of that. Why has Warner chosen to be engaged in the Chamber as a, invested member and a premier partner? Why is that important to you guys?
Yeah. I mean, I think, like I mentioned, being a larger firm, I think it's even more important for us to be involved in the communities that we're in. So we have 9 offices, which means 9 communities where we want to be donating money and sponsoring events like this and attending events, being on boards, all of that stuff. And again, with Holland being smaller, I think we try even harder to be involved in those types of things. I think for me, personally, it's a little bit different. So I started my career with Warner in the Midland office, which is where I was born and raised. Went away for school, came back, and kind of had like a built-in network. But then when I moved out here, which was 5-6 years ago, I was an adult, I had kids, not a lot of time to meet people. It was right before COVID, so kind of like the perfect storm of not being able to meet people. And everybody said, you got to start going to Chamber events. And so I started going to events. I did leadership last year. I joined the board this year. And I feel like every time I get more involved in the circle of the Chamber, I meet a new group of people, new opportunities. I should have read the agenda. I didn't know Scott was going to be here, but this is a perfect example. Because in leadership last year, they took us around to all the nonprofits in the area, and the one that really stood out for me with kind of a mission that I felt like I was passionate about was Action House, and Scott was in our group, and so I bugged him and bugged him and bugged him, and finally when the lawyer who was on the board stepped off, then I got to join that board too. So that's kind of a good example of where you get involved in one thing, and then it kind of spirals. So the Chamber's been very integral for my joining the Holland community.
Awesome. I'm so glad to hear that, and just so glad that you're such a big part of it. So is there a favorite thing, a favorite event that you and your team really like to be a part of, or one that really sticks out for you?
Yeah, I mean, kind of 2 maybe. So one, Lakeshore Women Connect, which that one was just a few weeks ago. We were one of the sponsors for that one. And, when I talked about going to chamber events, that was one of the first ones I went to. And I had a partner take me around and introduce me to all these women. And I remember thinking, I was very intimidating, but thinking these are such smart women, and they're doing great things, and kind of wanting to be part of that whole group. And then the other one, Community Impact Day, where, did that, I guess, last year for the first time. Again, sucking up to Scott, trying to get on the board. We went to Community Action House, which was great. Brought a group from our office, and just doing something that's different than your usual is so cool. Making an impact is great, and even just being part of, such a big event, I think, is kind of neat. So we're going to do it again this year. I don't think we know where we're going yet, but really excited to be part of that again.
Awesome. Beth, thank you so much. We truly appreciate it. Let's hear it for Beth, and thank you so much for your support. Okay, now it's time for a little bit of networking at your table before we get started with the presentation. So if everyone could please go around and share your name, your organization, and then one thing you're looking forward to this spring. Spring is upon us, the sun is shining, so what are you looking forward to? We'll give you a few minutes and we'll be back. I have to tell you, I just love the buzz of networking in the morning, guys. This is fantastic. Lots of good stuff happening coming this spring, so I'm glad you guys have had a chance to chat with each other about it. And then I encourage you to continue the conversations here afterwards. So we are ready to go ahead and get started with the main event here today. And this is what I'm so excited to introduce our speaker today. I recently had the privilege of serving on the board at Community Action House, and it was just so cool to have an inside look at such a trailblazing organization making such an incredible impact on our community. And with Scott as their leader, and just such a brilliant guy doing huge things that is really putting Holland on the map for the type of service that they offer, and caring for our neighbors with dignity is just a really incredible thing. And we are so fortunate that Scott and his team do such great work here in our community. So with that, I am just honored to introduce Scott Rumsa from Community Action House. Please join me in welcoming him.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Britt. I appreciate the kind introduction, and I also didn't know that Beth was going to be speaking today, and so all those little things about her having to work me to get on the board, I'm not sure if it's true. It went a little the other way as well. We're fortunate to have had these two wonderful female leaders on our board, and also I want to say that as I stand here, I'm representing not just Community Action House, but all the people behind it, the board, the staff, all of the volunteers, our guests, and our partners. And so I want to say it's a privilege to be here to share some of what I get to learn being at the center of collective community impact here in our community. So this is not a traditional presentation for me. This is not a, here's Community Action House, here's all the things we do and why we do it. There's going to be some of that. But really, I'm here to celebrate what makes this sort of work possible in communities like this. And as I look around the room today, I see faces who are partners. I see volunteers. I see nonprofit partners. I see business leaders representing some of those who make our work possible. Because as a community-funded nonprofit, none of our work is feasible without a community that shows up together and tries to wake up every day thinking how we can make this world, and this community in particular, a better place for those neighbors who need it most. So, Community Action House, when I talk about our niche in this community, right? One reason I'm here to share today is we get to stand at the nexus between human need in our community, between compassion, and we are a compassionate community, and collaborative problem solving. We stand at the center, need, compassion, and collaborative action. And that's a unique vantage point, and I can tell you it's an amazing space to get to identify needs and to work together to identify meaningful solutions to a lot of the challenges we see. Now today I'm going to talk a little bit more about that shared wins mindset, which is what we call it. We often refer to how do we find a shared win? How do we work to make that shared win happen? Because we know the biggest wins do not happen alone for any individual or organization. And so that's a really big thing. I'm going to talk about that. Then I'm going to talk about community trends and needs. Every year at West Coast Leadership, I'm asked and invited to share, like, hey, what are we seeing? What's need look like in our community? How are some people responding to it, some orgs responding to it in the human services space? How are we adjusting based on what we learn, what we know, and what we study? Then I'm going to highlight some of the recent shared wins, right? Give some examples of our community at its best coming together, and leave with some recommendations, reminders from my perspective about how we try to sustain the hard work that we need to put into the relational, collaborative problem-solving work that we all do together. So with that, a simple framework that I borrow and updated the language, but I often think about, one of my colleagues from a Kellogg Foundation Fellowship might recognize this, Lorena and back, is this is just a three-part thing that I often refer to when we're starting our planning. All big impact starts with intelligent study. Have you looked at benchmarks, ideas from elsewhere? Have you studied the trends and challenges here locally? Intelligent study. Then collaborative planning, another stage. And there is overlap in that. You do that together. You get others involved before you're at action. Bring their perspective. Sharpen each other's thinking. Think about what you can each add to that solution. And then collective action. What are you going to choose to do together, each in your own best way? What's your own best yes as a part of that solution? So those are those three steps that I often come back to when we're planning our efforts as a community organization. And I just want to say, some of that is like, it is harder to go together. You've probably heard that thing. You want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together. And sometimes the issues we're dealing with, we wish there were simple answers. We really do. But we have to understand things in all their complexity. We have to do the study. We have to figure out how we all fit together as a system, and then we move forward together, right? And so it's like, yes, simple is not always right. It's sometimes wrong. So working together and putting in the time to understand things in all their complexity and to create collaborative solutions that can work is the way. So I'm going to dive into those community trends and needs. And I'm going to start out with our success story. You guys have heard this a number of times up here. I love coming to the breakfasts like these and to celebrate like our community. Living here with my kids is a privilege. I love this community. And a lot of people do too. As you guys know, we are Michigan's fastest growing large county in Michigan for well over 10 years running. I think it's over 15 at this stage. And right now we're the 8th largest. And if we compare to the other population growth success story in Michigan, which has had its own demographic challenges statewide, that's Kent County. Since 2016, Ottawa's grown 2.5 times the pace of Kent. So a lot of new families are finding their way here. That's fantastic. People want to live here, work here, raise their families here. Median income growth, another indicator of success. We are a wealthy community, right? People come here, they can find good jobs, build good careers here. That's fantastic. And we see that trend line for household from 53 grand a year, median income, to 87 in 2023, most recent data I was able to find. Down below, you can see that comparison between Ottawa County and the state of Michigan. Median income's growing and outpacing growth in the state of Michigan. We celebrate that. We have a vibrant economic issue thanks to so many of you in this room, your teams, and others around the community. And that is something we need. That is a fantastic growth curve. And at the same time, I want to name, I'm here to represent human services. Not everyone makes the median income, right? And so we started to dive into what it's like if you're in the bottom third of the income distribution, what it's like to afford life, to keep up. So I'm going to talk a bit about that. That's our focus, but I don't ignore this, right? We have some challenges in that growth in the housing space, but I will take those challenges of growth over challenges of stagnation or shrink any day. So I want to define struggle. And one thing we often hear about is the federal poverty line, or like people in poverty. And so I'd say that what the federal poverty line is, it's a standardized economic measure that's been used since the 1960s to define who qualifies for certain government benefits, federal and state. What the poverty line is not is an adequate measure as to whether a local family's income is sufficient to meet their basic needs, right? That's different. That's different by every community. So in Ottawa County, over 9,400 families, that's about 28,000 people and 7,000 children, are below that federally defined poverty line. And that's about $15,000 a year for a single person, $31,000 for a family of 4. As I noted, financial struggle can occur well above the federal poverty line. And there's a name for that. And I want to give a shout out to Minnie, whose data I'm borrowing from this, like our friends at United Way, the ALICE Project. And what ALICE stands for, you heard ALICE, I'm sure, raise your hand. Yes, this is an educated group, I appreciate that. Asset limited, income constrained, but employed. What that looks for is people for whom they don't make enough on a monthly basis to cover the cost of their essentials, the basic cost of living in a community. And that's known as the ALICE threshold. In Ottawa and Allegan County, recent measures put that at 34% in our community live below that threshold of being able to cover their essentials. That's 37,000 households. And what that looks like budget-wise for a single person, that's $30,000 a year. So again, you're making more, but does it add up? This slide is one that I find really compelling when we look at some of the trends in need as they've developed over the last 10 to 15 years, and those are trends we watch when we develop programs together. So that blue line down there, the lower line, that's CPI, right? A basket of something like 80,000 goods. You guys get your economic forecast update. That's the big headline number we hear about. That increases every year, and it's bad when it increases really fast. That yellow line is a separate index known as the ALICE Essentials Index. That measures things like housing costs, rent, transportation, childcare, healthcare, food. Those things that if you're on a red line budget, what are you spending almost all of your money on? Those things. From 2007 onwards, that number has increased at a substantially higher rate than CPI. And that's up to a 43% difference over that period. And one thing I'd highlight is if you're a fixed income resident, like a senior living on Social Security without other savings, that blue line is what your Social Security resets on every year. That yellow line is what your costs reset on every year. And that's a bad ratchet game. And one of the fastest growing service populations in the human services space are seniors, people that haven't needed supports before because of the difference in those two lines getting larger every year. So when we look at that, we can compare those ALICE survival budgets of like the amount that's needed to cover the costs of essentials, and we can compare them to common working wage, entry working wages across Michigan, or common Social Security incomes, which average just over $22,000 a year nationwide. And I would note on that side, why is it growing? We're in a situation where a recent report shared that 2/5 of baby boomers are nearing retirement age with no meaningful retirement savings outside of their plan for Social Security. So these are trends that we're aware of in the human services space that we try to plan around. What does it mean when people have some income and it's just not enough? The other thing I'd highlight when we break down the whole household survival budget that they put out, you notice anything about that rental line? It says a family of 4, 2 adults and 2 children, can find a place in Holland to rent for $661 a month. Anyone know of a place? You got friends, family, colleagues, teammates? They're finding those places? Because if you do, please send them to our team because we know people that need those places, right? So another recent study by Housing Next back in 2021 said like, well, that number's not true, right? And like, so we can battle about these numbers a little. And they're saying in 2021, a 2-bedroom was actually between $1,100 and $1,300 a month. That's more accurate based on what our team sees out there. And you know what? Those numbers are even higher today because that's 2021, right? So what does higher rent do to the rest of that budget? It increases what has to be earned. And we see that line, poverty line, families in that hold roughly consistent over the last period. What we see is those people above the poverty line with incomes, but those incomes that aren't enough to keep up with the rising cost of essentials right now, has been increasing, especially recently. And how many of you are here to hear Dr. Isley in January? Yes. I think one of the quotes that I picked up from that I think is relevant is just nationwide, approximately 1 in 3 jobs added over the last 2 years were second jobs. And he shared, like, people aren't adding that, people don't take on second jobs for fun, right? They're adding them because people are trying to keep up with that increasing cost of living. That's a very real trend that we see. So what are the ramifications of people living in that area of financial struggle or unmet need? So we see that families without sufficient incomes prioritize that housing, paying more and more of their incomes for housing. This is old data I didn't have updated. This is in 2019, showing that 21% of our neighbors were paying over half of their budget on rent. Right? 42%, over 30%, known as housing burdened or severely cost burdened. What's that do for the rest of their budget? And in the human services space, when we plan or we're thinking, we often say in this framework, the rent eats first for any family, right? You're going to pay that rent. You're going to keep your family housed. That is the last thing to go, right? What are you going to economize on? You're going to pay for housing, pay for transportation? Often, food is the first thing to economize on. You're going to try to live on ramen and peanut butter for a while longer. You're going to cut back on things, right? And you can see those food insufficiency standards in this study about how much larger they are below the ALS threshold than those just above. We also know that poor diets are harming our health, and that not just as food cut back, but healthy nutrition options are among the first to be cut as families' risk tolerance change, as they need to buy ramen and less healthier items in bulk and try to subsist on those. And we can see this, and it's not the only thing, right? This is not a financial thing. There's behavior things that we work on, we intervene in as well, right? There's knowledge, there's education, there's motivation. But this is a part of it. What's affordable for people? And we've seen in Ottawa County, a recent study shared, that physical health metrics, fruit and veg consumption, and rates of chronic disease are worse now than in 2021, and actually performing worse. This is one of the few areas we're performing worse than state and national rates. And you can see that for consumed fruits less than 1 time a day and veg less than 1 time a day. Those are alarming numbers for our county. And so you see how quickly that is changing as financial pressure ramps up and other situations ramp up. So, other ALS budget ramifications. Financial struggle can intensify mental health challenges. Imagine if you're faced with impossible choices with your family. And again, look at the difference. Those that are reporting anxiety, significant mental stress below the ALS threshold or above. Now with that, I don't want any of that to feel too down, right? Like the key thing is to understand where we're at. That's the first part of planning. That's the first part of any leadership effort, right? Is like understand reality. And we can spend time going deeper and deeper into that about different trends and try to pull things apart, what's affecting behaviors and results. But there's not the time to do that. I want to highlight what are some shared wins when we start with intelligent study and understanding the way the community is and what can we do about it. And there are some very meaningful wins that we've achieved with our community that I want to celebrate. But I also don't want to just highlight Community Action House. I'm going to talk more about it, right? Like collaboration is how our community rolls. And it is a privilege to lead an organization here with so many partners that are willing to say yes to working together, thinking together, planning together, and acting together. That is a privilege. We work with nonprofit partners who show up as collaborators. We work with corporate partners that do. And here's just a short list of some highly collaborative cross-sector partnerships over the last couple decades that are still producing meaningful results in our community. Now, to talk about some of our stuff, where I can go a little bit deeper, I want to share about our food club and opportunity hub. How many of you have been to that space? I love this group. You guys are great. Thank you for being over there. I just chatted with somebody that was volunteering there Saturday. This is something that is fundamentally impossible without a community that shows up together to plan together and to sustain services that matter together. This was opened over 3 years ago in October of 2021 as a new approach to healthy food access that responds to some of those trends that we saw. The reality that more and more people have a regular income source, but for whom it's not quite enough. Families for whom that binary between fully free, inconvenient, and unhealthy and full price at Meijer just didn't quite work anymore. So what do we do about that? And so how Food Club works, right? It's a membership style, grocery store style experience where fresh, healthy options are on display and available for families to choose. Rather than free at a pantry or full price at a supermarket, it steps into that middle, right? And it builds community, offering other community-enhancing services, including nutrition services at our demonstration kitchen, all while incentivizing healthy options. So basically, families are invited to pay a small-scale fee, $12 to $19, small participation, they're paying as able. They receive a membership card with points based on how big their family is, how much food they'll need in their fridge that month. And then they spend those. As they walk around the supermarket, things are labeled in points. And fresh, healthy items, the broccoli, the strawberries, the other things, you'll see these for 1 point. So you walk in the back, the cake mixes, the Tostitos, 4, 5 points. We move the healthy food, the healthy half of your monthly food budget. Here's the community with you. This is how we show up together. So why Food Club? When we made this decision back in 2019, when we started our intensive planning on this, we realized that more than 60% of our regular pantry guests had a regular income source, but it was still not covering the costs of all their essentials. They were taking paid and unpaid time off work. They were coming as seniors and just waiting 2 hours and then getting what they could and moving forward. But there was a better way. Our studies and our research took us on visits to 2 other food clubs, one in Grand Rapids, one in Ludington. We discussed and planned with our partners at Feeding America West Michigan, one of our big partners in the food space. And then we wanted to make sure that we weren't duplicating other efforts across our community. So we partnered with Ottawa Food, which is a collaborative steering organization that works with over 40 different entities and individuals committed to healthy food access in our community. And finally, Community Spoke, a health and human services and government collaborative to make sure, again, that our plans were lining up with community studies, research, and goals. And at each of those, our process was refined. We were able to update our thinking. And our food club's different than the others. We refined it for the local context. In 2021, we moved in, and just really briefly, what we've been able to achieve is stepping further towards meeting the true nature of need in our community. We're serving over 30 times the number of people every day, all for a lower cost per meal on family table, while emphasizing healthy, fresh options in a high-dignity environment. So in 2024, just last year, what that looks like, nearly 4,000 families, nearly 12,000 individuals eating food from this community institution that many of you helped put together. Fresh fruits, fresh veggies, and dairy are the top 3 choices at Food Club. They're not required. That's what people choose because of the pricing structure and because it's accessible there. And nearly 2 million meals for families in our community on their tables because of what we've done together. And just one story right here of what that looks like. John, we've changed name, we've changed picture, but John is a real guest that came to our pantry for years. He struggled with health and mobility, and our volunteers would have to help him out of his vehicle, push him around in his chair to get a box of food from our old pantry. When we moved to Food Club, one of those same volunteers saw him after 5 months and said, "John, you're walking." He said, "You noticed, you saw me." And then he said, "This has changed how I eat. I've never eaten as many fresh fruits and vegetables in this, and I've lost 50 pounds. And that sounds like a made-up story, but that is real. And there are many more stories like that of people taking pride and taking control of their own health after having this as a community support and partner to rely on. And so that's a really big deal. So essentially what we did, we observed a need. We studied better ways. We refined that with guest and community support, including guest advisory boards and community sounding boards to make sure we got the planning right. And then the collaborative planning picked up steam. Who was going to be the team? Who could get involved in different ways? And I'm going to highlight some corporate expertise and skill-based volunteering that got really involved in this. And we took collective action, and that collective action continues to sustain this work. So I want to highlight a few, and I'm not going to name check everybody that was involved, so fair warning. Don't hate me if I don't name check you, right? But I want to highlight a couple different expressions of how skill-based volunteering and partnership showed up. So 2 of the ways, and there were more, that Disher showed up when he said, like, if we're planning this, hey, before we were in our final site selection as we were doing property searches, we were whiteboarding what we wanted to do. We knew what the other food clubs were. We also knew we wanted an opportunity hub to bring our financial wellness programming on site. What that could look like, what some blue sky designs, what we would want our guests to experience. So some of those whiteboard design sessions built our search criteria for the building and helped shape how we designed the inside space of that. Volunteerism. When we had folks, because we're a nonprofit, good folks at Myers donated a lot of shelving. It came without some parts, and it came without instructions, and it was repack. Good luck installing shelves. It's like a Lego kit with no instructions, right? Who do you call? Call engineers, right? So you get Disher, and they came over, and they had a team day, and they're like, we're going to solve that. We're going to buy the parts we need. We're going to print the ones we don't, and we're going to get these shelves up. And they did that right before we opened. Other partnership highlights. Folks in the food industry, right? We are a small format grocery store, right? We had partners at Meijer. They run 200,000 square feet. But there's a family up in the Grand Haven area that runs a whole network of smaller format grocery stores. We need, how would we lay out differently? How would you use space like this? They walked through it, helped give advice for freely sharing their expertise. Meijer donated the shelving and then steeply discounted their checkout and refrigeration display cases from a closing store in Ohio. We moved it up from Ohio in the midst of COVID with Meier's partnership. And they continue to support us in other ways. And then Hussman, our main refrigeration partner, donated time and also equipment, and then steeply discounted other things to help us get this right. And they were a core part of our design team on this space. And what's another thing our community does incredibly well? We create interiors that matter, that communicate dignity, that work for the use case as intended. And we had Hayworth, Miller Knoll, and Steelcase via Custer all send design teams to say, what's it like if we put our community's best swing at a space of welcome and dignity for many neighbors that often don't receive that and get to experience it. And it was so encouraging to have those teams working closely together to design a space for these neighbors with unmet needs. And they designed so well that this picked up a Michigan Interior Design Association award. And so they killed it. Gentex. I can remember the day when their industrial design team was walking through before renovation, marking chalk on the floor. Because we knew we were going to have to move millions of pounds of food, and we had only moved hundreds of thousands of pounds of food before. Laying it out for efficiency mattered. They changed where walls and doors and other process points were so that got built into our planning and our renovation efforts. Their software engineering team helped us with our tech stack, our tech stack, our point of sale system, that integration to our other database, and they got so inspired they signed up for monthly shifts working at our food club to make sure it happens. These things started to snowball. And of course, what do you do if hospitality is your industry and you're not an engineer and going to be putting shelves together? It's like, how can we show up? Is a helpful question. And some of you are at some of these events. We had a tent for a couple months during COVID outside this building as it was undergoing renovation, and New Holland's bar and hospitality team would show up and help host these events to make sure we mobilize the community resources and volunteers that we needed to get to open. And of course, the design and build team, and I would share this was more than just the generous contributions that both our build partner and our design partners and our subcontractor partners offered, but we had people like Beacons who didn't just donate appliances, but they run demonstration kitchens in their shops. And they knew we were building one. They're saying, no, it's not like a standard kitchen. Here's what you want it to be. They stepped into the design space and shared their expertise. Well, like, oh, we do 15-person classes all the time. Here's how you can do that right. We hadn't had a demonstration kitchen before. They had. How do we collaborate in the planning? Stowe Company, similarly, showed up and actually installed their free equipment and shelving and storage solutions. I want to move on to another one. It didn't stop there. We knew we needed to grow our food supply. And we've recently had another cross-community and shared win approach to food rescue. You've probably seen these Lakeshore Food Rescue trucks. You might have seen them at the farmer's market driving around. How many of you have seen these trucks? Lakeshore Food Rescue. Yes, that's Action House, and that is our community, right? What Lakeshore Food Rescue has come to accomplish in a short time, from nothing to broad community impact, is last year 3.7 million pounds of food diverted from landfills, while still wholesome, and shared out with families in need. Last year, 131 different food donors participated in that, and that was 37 new last year alone. And it's not just food that goes to food club shelves or the community kitchen space. 66 other nonprofit partners receive food via Lakeshore Food Rescue, and that was 26 new in 2024. There's the growth curve. You can see the green line. This is food that we used for our own food assistance efforts. In 2021, we knew we had to expand our food partnerships. We had a plan to how can we expand food rescue for us and our food partnerships to increase what we have on our shelves at Food Club, the amount of healthy produce that we have available. And then in 2023, we started planning with Ottawa County Department of Strategic Impact, with Ottawa Food to say, if we can rescue more, it means we'll have to say yes to any quantity, not partial loads, any quantity. And that means we'll have the ability to help others. So we were seeking positive externalities to our growth. How do we help others in the community while we ourselves are building capacity that we need? The food shared external, that red line, took off with some county level support, with partnership with Ottawa Food, again, this network of other nonprofits and others in the food assistance space. And that, to me, is one of the things I'm proudest of. The green line was if we just planned as an organization. The red are the positive externalities of a community that says it's too small a thing to do this just for us and our mission. It is too small a thing. And that's how we roll as a community. We look for those externalities that can influence the rest of the sector and other communities. So everywhere from Coopersville to Hudsonville, right? Our team is now providing behind-the-scenes support for healthy food access at smaller and other pantry operations. So the other thing that allowed the Ottawa County partners to really get involved is that this wasn't just about food access. There are other cross-sector wins. Nationwide, food waste makes up about 24% of municipal landfill waste, right? That's a big deal, and that's a cost in the system. It's food grown, shipped, stored, and then wasted, and it's a cost for landfill space. It decays quickly and contributes significant methane emissions, and thus has significant global warming and environmental impacts. It's environmental considerations. On the right-hand side, you can see some of those environmental contributions of Lakeshore Food Rescue just last year. Now, when we were planning this, we knew that we needed significant food acquisition growth, so where did our planning start? What other communities had been able to rapidly scale food partnerships? 412 Food Rescue in Pittsburgh. Number of conversations, got to know them, studied their work. We don't want to invent something brand new if it's been done before. Who else has grown? What can we learn from that? How do we take that to our community and then plan locally? And then we're like, well, you know what? Holland's not Pittsburgh. So we know they worked with this cool app that we wanted to bring that empowers volunteers to drive this food around the county, but Holland's not Pittsburgh. We're different. So what's a county using that app that's more similar? What about Prince William County, where the main population center is Manassas, right? More evenly distributed population, similar size to our county. Spent a lot of time on the phone and video calls with them. What's this look like? What was different for you than Pittsburgh as you rapidly scaled food rescue and partnerships? Then we got Feeding America on board, and they agreed to help introduce us to more and more food donation partners. And of course, this is just a small subset of some of the big food rescue partners that have really got behind increasing the amount of food that can be shared locally. And it also meant growing our fleet of refrigerated trucks for the big load. We hadn't done fleet management before, the maintenance cycles and everything. So who do we turn to acquire the trucks at a great value so we can be respectful of our donor dollar? Jim at Hood Trucking. I know they sold on, new name and everything, but that was a big deal. And then Ed at K&R. How are we going to manage that fleet? They got involved, not just to find vehicles at auction and to do the tire kicking and the maintenance checks for us so we knew we were getting quality vehicles, but they helped us understand what it was going to be like to run 4 to 5 food rescue vehicles day in and day out. And I can tell you, they're still involved, and it's really helpful on the K&R side. So we wanted to control our direct purchase costs while maximizing these positive externalities, and that meant planning with Ottawa Food and Ottawa County, that Department of Strategic Impact. And together, they decided to invest in expanding this so these other groups could benefit. And that meant for us at Food Club, we can compare our benchmarks against our other Food Club partners, and we know that we perform exceptionally well on our food acquisition costs per meal that we share. We perform incredibly well. And they're jealous of this collaborative infrastructure we have out here, and we're sharing our expertise and advising them right now, including in some contract and payable ways to help sustain our mission. But also, that big externality is nearly $4 million worth of food shared with other partners, because Ottawa Food and us plan together, how can we find ways to efficiently share? Now, the last big thing I want to talk about is the Affordable Housing Partnership. And each of this stemmed from our 2019 planning. What are the trends? What are the opportunities? Right now, we're working with Dwelling Place to, in June, break ground on a 52-unit, 2-site, mixed-income, affordable housing development to be one meaningful part of our community's housing challenge or housing solutions. So Food Club opened. You might have known our old pantry. There it is on the left, over by Collin Park, by the boat launch and the pickle factory, right? That's that little one dot. That's where we were. We moved to 8th and Paw Paw, number 2. That meant we had a property, and we could choose what to do with it. As we were in our planning of envisioning what could we do with that property, we were following all the data that Housing Next was putting out. We were talking to the folks that were intelligently studying system-wide housing challenges throughout our business community, with our municipalities. We want to learn from that data and say, how can we be one part, not the only part, right? One part of that if we have a property that's valuable. Now, in this data, we see that their 2021 report showed that over 15,000 units were needed, like at all price points. We also know, as we were following them, it's like what was beginning to gain traction was thanks to our partners at Habitat and Jubilee on the ownership side on the lower ends of affordability. In the rental space, the higher, maybe some of the middle, but no meaningful action below 80% area median income, right? 80% area median income is like $63,000, $64,000 a year. No meaningful rental housing development below that number. So like, how could we be something that developed housing in that space, in that community gap that Housing Next helped us identify? And so first, that blue parcel, that's where our space was. Our first thing was like, hey, how do we turn this into housing? Can we sell that to somebody? And they're like, well, that could be 7 units maybe. You do 7 units, that's great. And we wondered like, well, what if we thought bigger? And Keith will probably remember walking that site. Mayor Box will remember walking that site. Other folks at the City of Holland will remember walking. It's like, what if we combined efforts? What if some of this property from the city might be available for a community use of more housing, more high-quality housing for families who are working here and calling this place home? That red property was then put on the market with the city to meet a city goal of more housing for people in need. That allowed a 38-unit building to be built. So how do we do more together? That's just one small representation. Hope Church had been working on a separate project trying to get something over the finish line to build a smaller parcel over on 10th Street. And they had a heart for creating housing for adults with disabilities and low incomes. That was their mission, and they were unable to get that over the finish line. Eventually, we combined all three for one big proposal and one collaborative build project because it's easier to get things across the finish line together rather than have individual efforts. More housing, higher quality build, and more efficient on the funding side. So this is what it's looking like. On those two properties, we've got the Collin Park site being built on our former property and the City of Holland's former property, and the Hope Church site. 14 units over there. And there's also acquired as part of this a future phase where there'll be 5 3-bedroom row homes to increasingly diversify the amount of housing that's available in this area. And I want to share, part of all of this is knowing your lane. We don't build apartment buildings, and we don't manage them, and nor do we want to. And so we worked with Housing Next to assess, what are other nonprofit developers that have done this for decades and do it well? And we're proud to say, ours was property with a purpose, community partnerships, relationships, knowing what the need is. Dwelling Place has spent decades building and managing high-quality, mixed-income, affordable housing projects, throughout the community, including in Midtown Village up on River, a lower-income senior housing project at the former school. And that working together, we can each lean into our skill sets and create 52 new places for community members to call home. And here's the other part of that collaboration. Is Dwelling Place we haven't worked in Holland in 15 years. We want to again, but we don't know how we might close the gap. What we're really good at is getting the lion's share of the funding together. You can see they pulled in something called a low-income housing tax credit that covers about $12 million out of this development. They pulled in other funding sources. They've built things to get us about 93% of the way there. And that left us with about a 7% gap. By unit, that's $23,000 per unit, or a gap. And I was I'm not sure if we can get there. And I said, you know what? This is important enough to our community that we will fundraise for you. So my job in this is we care enough about housing that I'm going around not fundraising for Community Action House. I'm actually fundraising for Dwelling Place to get them across the finish line because this matters. And I think that's a powerful example of us caring about the system and the data that shows how critically we need housing at all price points in our community and saying this is a meaningful way to take action in a part of that where there hasn't been action taken. So I'd say many folks have been involved in this already. Those tick marks are 23 of the homes that are fully funded with donors. And I'm not making a hard pitch, but if you're curious about how you, your business, or anyone can get involved, my teammate Ricardo right here has information after the fact, and he can definitely share more on how to connect you with Dwelling Place on that. But I do want to make a little bit pitch for that. You can talk to Ricardo if you're curious, because it does take the community to close the last part of that gap. The last thing I want to mention on these examples is what's already underway. How many of you saw Travis and Christina speak last week, Advocacy in Action? Yes. Okay. Another way how our community rolls. When things get hard, when the housing crisis intensifies, and we see more people struggling with homelessness than ever before, it's not ignored. It's a way to show up. And this is not a table that we are setting, but it's a table we are at with so many others. And the encouraging thing is this collaborative group, Lakeshore Leadership Council, if you're aware of it, and the Lakeshore Housing Alliance. You've heard me reference Ottawa Food. That's this collaborative that focuses on food and nutrition. The Lakeshore Housing Alliance steers a collection of actors about who can each do the right next thing and the right best thing to align services in the housing and homelessness space. And I just want to give a shout out to the folks that are calling that together and also all the leaders that are showing up, putting organizational lenses aside and putting their Holland Zealand lens on and saying, how do we solve together? Jay from Gateway, Brian from Good Sam, Andrew from Reach for Recovery, and so many more are showing up in ways that matter. And when we do that, when we study the problem and decide next steps, these things are a big deal, and there will be some meaningful results that can come out of this because the intelligent study is happening, because the collaborative planning is happening, and soon we can get to collective action. But we've got to be committed to remaining to do the hard work. So I wanted to shout out those groups, not our table, but you're actively at it, and we think things like this matter greatly. Finally, few things that I want to leave you with as we think about how do we better strengthen and sustain all of this cross-sector collaboration. How do we avoid some of what we see elsewhere in other communities, this polarization, the not my problem. This community says, this is my community, I care. We center on compassion. Everything is our business. How do we find our right lane in it? So that's the reminder. Those are the three groups, how we work. But another way to say every one of these things that's been successful, I believe that I've been a part of, is you start with a need and don't oversimplify it. Check some of our assumptions. We have some of ours. We each have some of ours, right? Be ready to learn and understand the true complexity of what's going on. Prioritize that user. What's it really like for them? What does it really take to get to yes or the next right step? Solve as a system. And when doing that, I'd say in that business mindset or economics, what we're really doing is like not trying to push off external, like we're trying to intentionally create positive externalities. That's the privilege of the system and the nonprofit space I work in. And then cultivate and collaborate shared wins, right? This is a big deal. You have to invest in it. You have to commit in it. You have to put more time in it. I was just talking to Brandon as we led into this. It's like laying the groundwork for shared wins takes more time than going alone. You've got to know people. You've got to build trust. And you've got to build that collaboration architecture. And you got to stick with it. I've had some of these that went for about a year, and then they didn't work, and that's okay, and you learn in the process. But you got to invest up front into how you might plan together. And how do we embed it? Because we know it'll get hard, and we're like, how do we keep allocating resources into that collaboration architecture? So we try to embed it in our values, right? And so we know our niche, right? Human need, community compassion, collaborative action. And we wanted to embed that. So as we think about our values, we keep hitting these, and a few of these we come back to when we're talking collaborations. Guest-centered, that human-centered design. Let's put them. Let's really understand what's going on. This better as possible space. Show up curious. Show up committed to making it better. Don't stand on this is the way we've always done it. And that big one is like we even name it. It is one of our core values, collaborative by design, right? We seek partnerships and celebrate shared wins because social change is indeed a team sport. And out here, it is one of the better and most encouraging team sports I get to participate in, and those shared wins are some of the things I'm proudest of in the work that we get to show up for every day. Thank you guys for listening.
Scott, thank you so much. It is so helpful to see those data points and to use that as we look into leaning into being curious learners so that we can make a positive impact on our community. So thank you for sharing your insights, and thank you for being a master of collaboration. It has a positive impact on our community. Truly, and that's what I want to encourage each of you to do. Continue to be curious. One of the Chamber's core values is to be a curious learner. And we've got to look at the data. And we already live in a community that is so collaborative and does so many amazing things, but that does not happen by accident. So continue to be curious, lean into things that you're passionate about, and let's continue to see cross-collaboration between nonprofits and the corporate sector, education. That is how we continue to give our community the most competitive advantage possible. And it takes each of you to make that happen. So thank you again, Scott. We really, really appreciate it. I also want to give a thank you again to Landscape Design Services. Be sure to stop by their table before you leave, and also to Warner Norcross Judd for being our program sponsor this morning. And then we are looking forward to our program here on April 15th. We will be back here with Grace Gavin. And we've got a quick video that we'd like to share so you can see what is going to be happening next month.
Hey there, West Coast Chamber members. I'm so excited to be joining you for Wake Up West Coast on April 15th. My name is Grace Gavin. I'm the co-founder of No Honesty. And on April 15th, we're going to be talking about how to have healthy communication. We're going to cover 3 major topics. First, we're going to understand the 2 simple skills you need to build to become a masterful communicator. Number 2, we're going to cover the 2 barriers that get in the way of healthy communication. Then finally, number 3, we're going to understand how this shows up out in the world, and especially in the world of work today, so you understand what's getting in the way, how you can progress forward, and what healthy communication really looks like in today's day and age. I'm so excited to be joining you on April 15th. I can't wait. We'll see you then.
All right, so hopefully we will see you all back here on April 15th. And then the last thing before we go is something we are incredibly excited about. We have been working so hard, Hannah especially, on Community Impact Day on May 14th. And we are pumped because we set a really aggressive goal of getting 2,025 volunteer opportunities in 2025, and we are there. We have identified over 2,025 areas to serve. So this day is going to be bigger and better than ever, but now we need all of you and your friends and your family and your coworkers, anyone that you can get to join you to come show up and serve our community. We'll be in a sea of blue t-shirts and just making such a positive impact across the entire state, actually. So be a part of something big, be a part of making West Michigan the most vibrant and best place to be. So we hope we will all see you there as well. Sign-ups are out. Check our website if you'd like to get involved. So with that, thank you all so much for being here. It makes a big difference to continue to connect and collaborate here. Make it a remarkable day. Thank you, guys.